Welcome to this presentation on Vedic astrology. This is a particular presentation that is geared toward understanding what's going on in the world these days according to the wisdom of Vedic astrology. So the first things that I'm going to do are talk a little bit about some basic terminology in the Vedic tradition. And then go into a little bit of astrology from there. And then we're going to look at some actual astrological charts, including the chart of the United States and Donald Trump and some other important charts. So bear with me while we get through the beginning information, because I think it really helps to get a real grounding in what's happening these days from this Vedic perspective. So the first thing I like to do at the beginning of a presentation such as this is to say a prayer to our lineage masters. In this case, I have Padmasambhava here and some of his disciples. So I'm just going to sing a prayer 3 times, the mantra. Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Om. Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Om. Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Om. So that was a Buddhist mantra, and you'll see I'm kind of switching back and forth between a few different traditions here. So right now I'm back to talking about the Vedic tradition, and this is an explanation about where the Vedas come from. You may have heard of the Vedas. The Vedas are basically the wisdom tradition that originated in India, and Buddhism really also came out of the Vedic tradition. So here we have at the top of this chart the Paramatma, and then Aum, the syllable Aum, which then became the Vedas around 5000 BC. And there are 4 different Vedas that we'll be talking about on another slide. And then what I wanted to really show you is the bottom level here. I don't know why I can't find my cursor. Oh, there it is. The bottom level here, which are the Vedangas, the limbs of the Vedas. And so the Vedangas are called the limbs of the Vedas, and Jyotish, which is astrology, is one of the Vedangas, one of the limbs of the Vedas. The other limbs are the hands, the ears, the nose, the face, and the feet. But Jyotish is considered to be the eyes of the Veda. And the reason it's considered to be the eyes, if we want to just now say Veda means wisdom, that Jyotish gives us a kind of insight. And that's why it's such an important science. But it is considered one of the Vedic sciences, one of the Vedangas. And the word Jyotish, Jo means light, Tish means divine or divinity. So basically Jyotish, which is the Sanskrit word that we call Vedic astrology, means divine light. So I mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about these 4 Vedas. There's the Rig Veda, which we're going to also be talking about yugas or eons in a moment. And the Rig Veda corresponds to the Gold Yuga, when things were very perfect. And we're going to go more into that. The Yajur Veda was the Silver Yuga, related to the horse's head. Each of these Vedas has a different head. The Sama Veda was the goat head in the Bronze Age, and the Kali Yuga, you may have heard the expression Kali Yuga, which is the Yuga that we're considered to be in now, is related to the Atharva Veda, and the monkey head, which is Hanuman. And then all 4 Vedas relate to Ganesh, who we have a picture of here, who represents memory and wisdom. So as I said, Jyotish, the Sanskrit word for Vedic astrology, means divine light. And so it is basically bringing the light of divinity, shining the light of divinity onto all of our karmas and everything that is happening to us. Brings us insight and light. So as I said, Jyotish is the eye of the Vedas. It's very helpful, I think, for really understanding one's karmas. The map, the birth chart or your horoscope is a map of the karmas that you came in to experience in this particular life. And to really appreciate Jyotish, or to appreciate what this all means, you kind of need to have a sense that there are more than one life. We have more than one lifetime, so a sense of reincarnation, or a belief in reincarnation, and also a belief in what we call karma, cause and effect, that the things that you may have done in past lives is now bearing fruit in this life. So, when we have issues or problems, it's probably something that happened in the past, and probably in another lifetime. In Sanskrit, there are many different kinds of karma. Some are the karmas that bear fruit in this lifetime. Some are seeds that aren't going to bear fruit for a while. And so the idea that Jyotish, through its insight, can help us to understand our karmas better and to purify our karmas, so that in future lifetimes we have more ease, we're able to be of service, we have fewer hassles in the world, etc. So we're basically trying to learn how to clear our obstacles for this and future lives, and also deal with the obstacles that arise in our life due to the karmas that we created in our past lives. So this is really what Jyotish is looking at. Now I'm going to talk about the term dharma, because it's very important in the Asian traditions. And so I'm going to go through it both from the point of view of the Vedic, ancient Vedic tradition, and also the Buddhist tradition. So the word dharma is actually used in English a lot now too, because there isn't a good single equivalent for the word dharma in English. The root of the word dharma is dri, which means to support, hold, or bear. It is the thing that regulates the course of change by not participating in change, but the principle that remains constant. This is a Sanskrit dictionary definition of dharma. It also means right way of living, or the path of righteousness or rightness. An example of dharma that I was given when I first started studying Vedic astrology was that the sun is what defines dharma. That the sun rises every morning in the east and sets in the west, and no matter what else is going on, the sun is completely dependable, reliable, and always does the same thing. So this kind of path of righteousness in terms of how it reflects in the human world. Duty, rights, character, vocation, religion, customs, behavior, all of these are regulated by dharma. And the opposite of dharma is adharma. So it kind of means not dharma. And so things that go against the dharma, things that are unethical, immoral, etc. There's a quote from an Upanishad, a Vedic scripture: "Nothing is higher than dharma. The weak overcomes the strong by dharma as over a king. Truly, that dharma is the truth, satya. Therefore, when a man speaks the truth, they say he speaks the dharma. And if he speaks dharma, they say he speaks the truth. For both are one." So, dharma has a lot to do with truth. And in the Buddhist tradition, Dharma, again, has multiple meanings. And the word Dharma in Tibetan is Chi, and it just can mean a variety of things, but they all kind of connect if you understand the philosophy a little bit. So one term that is used a lot in Buddhism, the eternal Dharma, is again very similar to the Vedic understanding that there's just some kind of basic truth that is always there. Whether the Buddha is there teaching it or not, it's always there. So it's that eternal wisdom that is always there. But the word Dharma is also used for how we translate into English phenomena, which is basically everything that arises, our senses, our thoughts, what we feel, what we see, what we think. All phenomena are called Dharma. The multitude of thoughts, perceptions, and occurrences that make up our experiences as human beings. So this is actually relates to a very profound principle in Buddhism, which is phenomena. We're always very involved in all of our thoughts and feelings and images. And at the same time, all that phenomena is really nothing but eternal truth. So they seem to be two things, but I think that the reason in Tibetan and also in Sanskrit that Dharma is used for both of these concepts is that phenomena and eternal truth are actually one on the ultimate level. And it's only because we get into this dualistic way of looking at things that we start thinking that phenomena is one thing and Dharma is another thing. Dharma is also used a lot as the path. And often when I do readings for people, when I'm talking about, there's actually a house in the chart, the 9th house is the house of Dharma. And when I'm talking about the 9th house, I usually use the word path because that makes it really easy. And the path is really made up of how we respond to phenomena. That's what our path is. So it's very connected. The word Dharma as the path, how we respond to phenomena. Do we respond to it in a dualistic way by reacting to it or grabbing for it, or do we have a more even way of dealing with phenomena? And if we do have a more even way of dealing with phenomena, we are closer to practicing Dharma. So those are some definitions of Dharma. I think those are some of the basic ones that we should talk about here. So now we're going to move into talking about time. And time is divided in the Vedic tradition into yugas. And we have a bull here. He's the bull of Dharma. And this bull has 4 legs. And those legs represent the 4 different goals of life at different times of life. The legs are Dharma, which we've discussed what that means. Kama, which means pleasure. Artha, which means wealth. And moksha, which means spiritual liberation. So these 4 stages of life are, if we start with kama, that's pleasure. That's like a little baby who, wants to feel happy and cries when he feels sad. And what he's looking for is to feel good, to have a nice full tummy and to be in mama's arms, etc. That's kama. Artha represents the next stage of life, when a young person wants to go out there and start creating wealth for himself or herself, and is kind of working at accumulation. Dharma is actually the 3rd stage of life, which is when you become an elder, and instead of just focusing on your own wealth, you're actually leading and in a position of leadership, and advising and mentoring others in your community, and basically bringing the Dharma, bringing the path, or bringing righteousness into your society. And finally, the last stage of life is moksha, which is spiritual liberation, where you just let go of all the worldly events and go into spiritual practice and meditation. So this bull of Dharma has 4 legs, and these 4 legs represent the 4 yugas. During the Golden Age, or Satya Yuga, Satya means truth, beings were capable of very prolonged meditation. The human lifespan was 1,000 years, and it was truth, or Dharma, prevailed. The bull has his full 4 legs. It's also called Krita Yuga, which means well done or perfect. So this is definitely what we would call a golden age. Then Shani, who's Saturn, takes one of the legs of the bull, the Dharma leg, and the bull gets older, and we're in the Silver Age. And during this time, the truth is only 3/4 there. It's the Tretra Yuga. The human lifespan is cut in half to 500 years. Material forces start to exert their influence, and communion with the divine was through sacrifice. People become more materialistic, a lot of wars. This is considered to be when the Mahabharata, in the great epic stories of India, took place. And climate change became commonplace, giving rise to deserts and oceans. So there was a change in climate at this point. The Dwapara Yuga is when Saturn takes another leg away, and this is only half of truth is left. This is the Bronze Age. Material darkness increases. Human lifespan is down to 250 years, and communion with the divine is through worship. These are some people singing and dancing, worshiping. And finally, the yuga that we're considered to be in now is Kali Yuga, where Saturn takes the leg Kama, and the bull is only standing on one leg, Artha, which is wealth. So this is, Kali means iron. It's the Iron Age. Wealth is the main objective. Kings, they say kings will become thieves. So, our leaders, instead of having more being led by Dharma, they are greedy and just trying to take. And I'm sure, we can all look at what's going on politically and identify with that. Discrimination is lost. Human longevity goes down again by half to 125 years. These are kind of maximum, obviously. And the final dissolution will come, and communion with divinity at this time is through names. So this is really the point, that this has been like kind of a funnel, where we started in the Golden Age, where there's this just very blissful, easy divine communion, until we get to this point where society is just so corrupt and so anti-dharma, that what we're left with is the name. So the name, mantra, another way of saying the name is, if we're talking about divine names, what we're talking about here are mantras. The word mana means mind, tre is to protect. So mantra means to protect the mind. So in Kali Yuga, it's divine names that bring us into resonance. And you'll hear this in a lot of different Asian traditions. For example, the Hare Krishna movement is based exactly on this. And it's actually, they give this exact same explanation. They say this is Kali Yuga, and the way that we can actually connect is by chanting the name of Krishna. And in the Buddhist tradition, it's basically the same, saying we are in a degenerate age, and what we can really do is, call out. Um, and I'm going to be going more into into a few specific mantras once I show you the charts and give you some ideas of some mantras that I feel are particularly helpful at this time. I also just want to mention that there are different kinds of yuga systems and approaches. Normally when you study this stuff, it's not like anything is carved in stone or it's only that way. In other systems, there's actually that human consciousness is actually on an upward movement. But in terms of what's going on in the world, the material world, everything is kind of devolving at this point. So, there are different systems, so I don't want to just leave it that, oh, it's just at a bad point in Kali Yuga. But in other ways, there is a kind of renaissance and refinement always going on. So they're both happening in opposite directions at the same time. So now we're going to go into actually the astrology of this. First of all, we're going to talk about what a planet is. Whoops. And a planet, in the word for planet in Sanskrit is graha, which means to grasp or to grab, from the word grahana, to eclipse. So eclipse means to take away the light. So the planets are incarnations of Vishnu, the sustainer, who grab the soul and bring it to life. So basically, the planets represent our karma. So, for example, Venus, which is about love, represents our karmas about love, and it grabs us in ways that have to do with love and attachment and desire. So, as I mentioned earlier, the natal chart is a map of your karma, and you can also have a map of a nation's karma. Or you can look at what's going on in the world and see what's going on in the world karma as well. So all of the grahas, all of the planets basically represent some kind of grabbing and bringing us into existence. I'm not going to go into all the planets. I do that in my introduction, which is on my website, astrohealing.us. But I'm going to go into a few planets because I want to make sure everybody understands the main ones that I'm going to be discussing. So Saturn is like an old man. He represents the wind element, creates dryness, dissipation. He represents the bad karmas that we bring into this life from our previous life. He's the planet that represents disease and rules hard work, the muscles, restrictions, sorrow. The metal associated with Saturn is lead, chronic diseases, and has a strong relationship with the moon. The moon represents healing, and Saturn represents disease. And the moon takes 28 days to go around the Earth, and Saturn takes 28 years to go around the zodiac. So I wrote a paper about Saturn and the moon and health and disease, because it's really interesting when you look at charts in terms of healing to see how they relate and how they work together and against each other. The next planet I wanted to talk about is on the opposite end of the spectrum. Saturn is the great, what we call malefic, meaning that Saturn brings our pain and sorrows and our difficult karmas. Jupiter is the opposite. The name of Jupiter in Sanskrit is Guru. So Jupiter is the teacher, and specifically the teacher of the highest levels of knowledge and wisdom and learning. He's the one that helps us to know God. He also represents peace, he's the ether element, so he brings everything together toward a common goal, brings wealth, good fortune, spiritual path, wisdom, truth, happiness. So all the good stuff, Jupiter. I mean, there are things, of course, if you have an afflicted Jupiter, you could end up gaining weight or eating too many sweets and having liver trouble, and there are different things. But in general, Jupiter is what we call the great benefic. So now I'm going to tell you a story about the north and south nodes of the moon. This is from the Vedic tradition, but there's actually a very similar understanding in the Kabbalistic tradition of the nodes. So in the story goes that the gods and the demons, which represent the light and dark sides of our consciousness, were churning the ocean of milk. And they were doing this on top of this tortoise who basically who holds up the universe. And this is Mount Meru here. And on top of Mount Meru is Vishnu, the sustainer. And they're using Vasuki, the serpent, to churn the ocean of milk. They're trying to get a drop, they're trying to get the nectar of immortality, the Amrita, to come out of the ocean of milk. And just as a drop comes out, a serpent, or a serpent we'll call him, or Naga, swept down and got the drop in his mouth. And Vishnu took his chakra, which was his weapon, and cut the serpent in half. And the serpent became an immortal head without a body, which is the north node, and then a bodiless, a head without a body, just the head, and then a body without a head, which is Ketu, the south node. So the north and south nodes are actual mathematical points which are used in astronomy to define where eclipses are. That's what the north and south nodes are. So we have the sun and the moon that are the luminaries that bring light to us. And then we have the eclipse nodes, the north and south node, which are the head and the tail of this greedy serpent that take away the light. And so the node that we're most interested in here is the one that I have a picture of here. This is Rahu. He's the head without, and you can see he's eating the disk of the sun in this picture. So the nodes take away the light. That's why they're called the shadow planets. They take away the light, which is like taking away the Dharma. And they're always going retrograde, whereas sun and the moon, luminaries, are always direct, and the nodes are always retrograde. Now, I'm making it sound very black and white, but Rahu has some good indications too. Rahu helps you to go beyond the border. So it's good for kind of exploring foreign things or going where you wouldn't have gone before, and unconventional ideas, innovative ideas. And Ketu being not having a head can represent not having an ego. Ketu is what represents homeopathy, because it's kind of invisible things or subtle energies, subtle things. Ketu also represents Buddhism. Right in the Vedic scriptures, it says Ketu is a Buddhist. So Ketu is good for spirituality, and Jupiter is the remedy for Rahu. So now that I've talked a little bit about these, I'm going to talk a little bit about remedies, and then we'll look at charts. So the nice thing about Vedic astrology is it's not just kind of telling you these things that are upsetting and you can't do anything about them, just like it's fate. What Vedic astrology is really about is remedies and what you can do to help and purify your own karmas or the world karmas, which is what we're going to be talking about here. So there are so many ways to do this in Vedic astrology. There's gemstones, there's mantras, there's karma yoga, so many ways and so many mantra systems. It's just a hugely vast science. But I'm going to show you one which is based on the Kala Chakra that I really use quite a bit in choosing remedies, astrological remedies. So we have, I don't know if you can read glyphs here, but these are the glyphs of the planets, and it's basically showing the planet over here, Venus, You probably recognize Venus and Mars. Those are pretty common. So up in the upper right-hand corner here, we've got Venus, and Venus, which represents love, overcomes Mars, which is, aggression, so to say, so to speak. And then if we go, actually, that's counterclockwise. Let's go clockwise. The sun is its own remedy. The sun is the remedy of the sun. Jupiter, as I mentioned before, which represents wisdom, dharma, righteousness, overcomes Rahu, which basically, I would say Rahu is the planet of a-dharma, anti-dharma. So Jupiter is the dharma planet, and Rahu is the anti-dharma planet. Because of the wisdom and righteousness of Jupiter, and then Rahu being the one who wants to go and, break all of the rules, basically. Mercury is considered the remedy for the moon, because Mercury is kind of logic, and the moon can represent emotions. So if somebody's got an afflicted moon and is too emotional, etc., Mercury, remedies that have to do with Mercury might help. And on this slide, unfortunately, the moon got cut off, but the moon is down here, and the moon is a remedy for Saturn. So Saturn is, as I mentioned before, disease, sickness, bad health, bad karma, etc. Very similar. Rahu and Saturn are almost identical. Rahu is sometimes called ultra Saturn. So anyway, the moon overcomes Saturn, and with the healing effects and the harmonious effects of the moon. So now I'm going to get into actually what's going on in the sky and what we can be thinking about in the coming times, especially the next couple of years. Jupiter went into the sign of Scorpio in October 2018 and will be there for about a year. Jupiter's transits are about a year long, until about October of 2019. And Jupiter, as I said, represents wisdom and knowledge and represents a teacher. And Scorpio represents esoteric sciences such as astrology, yoga, any kind of transformative technique. I would include homeopathy in this too, but any kind of healing that kind of might take you through a healing crisis or take you through a transformative time, or any kind of healing that is connected with chronic disease. This is a great time to study it. And I think especially with Jupiter and Scorpio, getting grounded in these kinds of subjects would be really good. This is one reason I may be starting another cohort of the Vitalism program, because I think Jupiter and Scorpio, let's do it now. A great time to start studying astrology and esoteric healing, etc. All right, so now we're looking at charts. This is the chart of the United States. And so this chart is July 4th, 1776, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I was mentioning before, you can, countries can have charts, even a state could have a chart, or one of my teachers who does a lot of this, James Kelleher, has a chart for the S&P 500. And looks at what the stock market is doing based on the chart of the S&P 500. So anything can have a chart. Of course, you read it a little differently. So I'm going to read a little bit of the USA chart to you right now. I keep losing my cursor. Oh, there it is. Okay. So first of all, we see in this chart that Sagittarius is rising. Sagittarius is a sign ruled by Jupiter. It's a very positive, dynamic sign. Yes, we can do it. Yes, we believe in justice and righteousness. It's, a sign of all of that. It's the powerful sign of Jupiter when Jupiter is in his office and doing his work, which is, promoting justice and righteousness. And then Jupiter in this chart goes into the sign of Gemini. And Gemini is the perfect sign for our times right now, actually. It's all about multitasking and communications and, you know, bringing its the melting pot, you know, how everything kind of all kinds of different influences all kind of coming together. And interestingly, when the US was born, it was in the beginning of a Rahu period. And Rahu, as we know, and we're going, you know, as I mentioned, the north node of the moon has to do with bringing all kinds of things together. It also has to do with turmoil and revolutions and, you know, unconscious material coming out. So, you know, the US was immediately in a Rahu period right when it was born. Now, the Jupiter sounds so great, oh, can do, wonderful, etc. But what's happening is this Jupiter actually has malefic influences on it from both Saturn and Mars. So Mars represents violence and defending territories and, you know, being territorial, and the ruler of the fourth house, which is the land, is also here. The ruler of the fourth house is also Jupiter, and so the violence that was done to the indigenous people, for example, and the sadness, because Saturn is also aspecting that Jupiter. So, you know, it's not an unblemished Jupiter. It's a Jupiter that has afflictions to it. So that just gives you a little idea of what the chart looked like when it was born, that there was some sense of, you know, justice, but then there was also this undercurrent that we all know about. So, and I mentioned that when USA was born, it was in a Rahu period. Well, let's look at what's been going on more recently. This is a chart here of the planetary periods over on the left. So on 10/2/2008, the US went into a major period of Mars. Does anybody remember what happened in November of 2008? Obama was elected, right? So these were the Obama years, 2008 through almost to the end of 2015, getting to 2016. These were the Obama years. So we look at Mars, it was the Lord of the Fifth, which is a house of good karmas and education. It placed in the seventh house. This is what's called a Raj Yoga, a king-making yoga. So this is a fairly fortunate period based on this. And when the US was probably going to do pretty well during that time. And sure enough, we had a president who kind of took us through those years. So what happened is we went into a Rahu period on 10/3/2015. And that's when the influence of Rahu became very prominent. Rahu in this chart is in the eighth house, which is a house of transformation and change. You know, in terms of a country, it can be turmoil and that kind of thing. And it's in an exchange with the moon. And the moon in this kind of chart represents the people. So it can show that, you know, a lot of turmoil and change and unrest among people. And especially the moon can represent women. So that this is the period we're in now. Actually, we went into a major period of Rahu right before Trump was elected. And now we are in a sub-period of Jupiter until November 7th of 2020. So this sub-period of Jupiter, I've already talked about Jupiter. It's a little bit of a happier planet. Unfortunately, in transit, we are getting a bad transit coming up in June that I'm going to be talking about soon, which is going to afflict these two houses, the first house and the seventh house. So there's some things going on that are going to cause some trouble for our country with the transits of different planets. But in general, that first beginning of that Rahu period is when, you know, all hell broke loose, so to speak, because of going into this Rahu cycle. All right, so this is a time that's coming up, and I wanted to just give people a heads up. The date is June 12th, 2019, when these all come into perfect alignment, but several weeks before and several weeks after are also not really great times. And what's happening during this time is we've got Mars and Rahu, which are the two of the bad guys in the sign of Gemini. And then we've got Saturn and Ketu, which are the other two bad guys in the sign of Sagittarius. And remember that this is the head, this is the ascendant of the US. So this has a strong effect in the United States. And so Saturn can bring, Saturn can bring pressures and illness and constriction. Mars is kind of explosive and wants everything to happen at once. A Saturn-Mars opposition like this is sometimes described as being in a traffic jam. You're trying to go forward, but you can't. But you're getting frustrated because you can't go anywhere. And then the nodes are involved as well. And Ketu, the south node, is just like ultra Mars, and Rahu, the north node, is just like ultra Saturn. So you've kind of got Saturn, ultra Saturn, Mars, ultra Mars, and then in the middle of all of that, you've got Mercury, which is the planet of communication. And Mercury tends to take on the flavor of the planets that he's around. So, communications could be really off. There may be things that happen during this time that are difficult and stressful, and events, within a month of on either side, or a few weeks on either side of this time. And so for me, I would say, as much as you can, keeping quiet, don't plan to do anything major, or take, risky trips, or start a business, or, just, it's a real good time to kind of lay low, stick close to home. I wouldn't want to go into any big events like stadiums and football games or concerts, or places where there are thousands and thousands of people. I just don't think it would be a good time to do that, because the energies, I'm not sure exactly what's going to erupt when or how, but these kinds of energies can bring some kind of eruption that would be good to stay away from. One thing that James Kelleher points out is that Saturn and Ketu down here are in a lunar mansion called Purvashada, which is represented by a deity, Apis, which is deified water. So he thought that there may be some things that happen that have to do with water, either too much water, too little water, floods or droughts, etc. Could be involved with that. All righty. You ready to hear about Donald Trump? So I was doing a graduate class for my vitalism course right during our last presidential election cycle. And I showed the students this chart, and they could tell that it looked like, and this was kind of early on, we looked at it and said, it looks like Trump is going to win. We could see it in his chart, and I'll show you why. So Mr. Trump, President Trump, has a Leo ascendant. Now, we all know that Leo has to do with royalty and all of that. So, he definitely tends to think that he's the center of the universe. On top of that, it's in a lunar mansion. The ascendant is in a lunar mansion called Maga. which is represented by a throne room. So this adds to this royal sense. Mars is also in the ascendant, making him very aggressive and pushy. And Mars is also in the Maga lunar mansion, which makes him, yes, very entitled and very pushy about getting what he feels entitled to. Then this is the real key thing here. We then look at where is the ruler of Leo, the ascendant. Well, it's in the 10th house, which is a house of career. And it is very closely conjoined Rahu. So the sun, which represents Dharma, as I mentioned before, righteousness, truth, is being totally eclipsed by Rahu, the anti-truth and the anti-Dharma. And not only that, but in this other house, the moon, which is the other luminary, is being eclipsed by Ketu, the south node. So he was born, I didn't look up to see whether he was actually born on an eclipse, but this is what an eclipse looks like when the luminaries are conjoined the north and south node. So he is kind of like an eclipse. He's like the anti-Dharma. He's taking away the light, just to put it bluntly. On top of this, the moon is in the sign of Scorpio, which is its sign of debilitation. And his moon is just toast, because it's in its sign of debilitation. It's being aspected by these malefics, and whoops, where did we go? Okay, there we are. It's being aspected by these malefics, including Mars. So the moon is just under horrible affliction. Moon represents mother. Moon represents harmony. Moon represents healing. He has a very, very afflicted moon, just like he has a very, very afflicted mind. That's where this comes from. So if I were doing a reading for Donald Trump, I would say you have a really, if it were somebody who was like spiritually aware and could actually take it and I could speak directly, I would say, this chart is showing a lot of pain and affliction around the moon, which represents women, and also here Venus is also afflicted, the other planet that represents women. I would say, your karma yoga is all about being of service to women and healing these karmas you have around women. Well, guess what? This is obviously not somebody who's looking to create less karma. He's somebody who's creating more karma by the way he treats women and the way he insults women. So anyway, the reason we could see that he was going to win is because on 11/16/2016, he went from a major period of Rahu to a major period of Jupiter. And Jupiter in his chart is in the second house of personal gain. It's aspecting his 10th house of career. And those things show he's going to have some good fortune and personal gain in his career. And Sun in the 10th is like a leader. So anyway, even my beginning students of astrology looked at that and said, looks like he's going to win. So it was kind of upsetting, but turned out to be true. The thing that's happening now with Trump is that on January 4th of 2019, he went into a sub-period of Saturn. And Saturn in his chart is the lord of the 6th house of enemies, placed in the 12th house of loss, and it is conjoined his 10th lord, Venus, and Venus represents women. So it looks like, some enemies, he's going to lose some things because of some enemies, and it can have something to do with women. So, that his golden period, may be over. And that period, the period he's in now, lasts until July 7th of 2021 beyond the next election. So he's going to have that bad, period of Saturn on him. So that may have his charmed time may be over. So that's a little bit about Donald Trump. And as I said, when we looked at this chart, it was really pretty obvious. All right. I also just want to say that some other terms that we might come up with when we talk about Rahu are lies and disinformation. And so, the kind of disinformation and constant lies, etc., really come from that Rahu there. All right, so now I'm going to go into the last period that I wanted to discuss, which actually isn't coming up until December of 2020, but it's very significant. So I wanted people to start knowing about it now. So Swami Shivananda Murti, who was a Hindu saint and also a Vedic astrologer and a teacher of James Kelleher, one of my teachers, predicted in the mid-90s that the lowest point for Dharma would be this upcoming situation that I'm going to show you in a minute that's happening in December of 2020. And he said at that point, people will not be acting out of Dharma. They will act out of insecurity, fear, paranoia, and selfishness, including a few years before and a few years after. So we're actually already entering into it. So basically, what I'm saying here is that Trump is just a piece of a whole trend that is going on, and the trend is not going to end with Trump. So this is the chart of this moment that I'm talking about. I'm just showing it here, that you can see how Jupiter and Saturn are together at the exact same degree in the sign of Capricorn. Now, Capricorn is the sign of Jupiter's debilitation, and they are going to be, so Saturn is also the ruler of Capricorn. So it's basically like, let's say you take let's say you take a saint. You take a saint and you put him in the house of an evil demon, and then with the demon, that's what's going on here. So basically this is why the Swami said this is a time of the lowest point of Dharma. The other thing is Jupiter has an exact point of debilitation in Capricorn, and it's within just a few degrees of that exact point of debilitation. So Jupiter, which represents Dharma and righteousness and truth and things, is going to be very deeply debilitated right at this moment. The other thing is, as you may have noticed, this happens exactly at the time of the winter solstice, which is already the time when the sun is at its greatest point of debility. And in this particular case, the sun is in a lunar mansion called Mula, which is the root. And it has to do with, it's connected with the galactic center. It's the lunar mansion that is, if you continue in that direction, you are heading toward the galactic center. And the Vedic rishis called it the root, meaning that a lot of the unconscious or subconscious material can come out. It's ruled by a wrathful goddess, and the power or the energy is the energy of destruction. So from a lot of points of view, this seems like this is a time that Dharma will be on the decrease, and the years before and the years after. I looked and I saw a similar one. I actually wrote to James and asked him about it, because there was a similar thing that happened back in 1961, but it wasn't this bad for a variety of reasons. But during that time was the Bay of Pigs invasion, which, was considered to be like a worldwide freak out thing. And also soon a few years after that, JFK was assassinated. So these kind of significant, difficult events are the kinds of things that can happen around these times. So again, the reason I want to talk about these things is really to give people a heads up, but also to think about what some things that we could be doing, could or should be doing personally. And some of them, I think, have to do with very practical things, like being, quiet and careful and kind of keep staying in place and taking care of oneself in place, just like you would any other kind of earthquake preparedness or fire preparedness, but just kind of be ready to take care of yourself. But also spiritual remedies that may help to alleviate not only our own suffering, but others' suffering. So I'm going to start talking about remedies now. And the first remedy, I mentioned that the remedy Jupiter in Sanskrit is called guru. So one way to strengthen Jupiter is to have a strong connection with a spiritual teacher or a guru. And there's a guru that I'm talking about here, which is Guru Rinpoche, who was considered to be the second Buddha who brought Buddhism to Tibet. He's known in Sanskrit as Padmasambhava, the lotus-born, and was prophesied by the first Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, that he would be coming. He was an 8th century yogi from the Indian subcontinent. And there's an interesting story. A monk came to Tibet on the request of the king to bring the Dharma, but the monk was not able to do it because he would try to build these temples and monasteries, and the spirits of the land were jealous and would be taking the monasteries and the temple down just as fast as it was being built. And finally, the monk said, we need to call in Padmasambhava because we need somebody who can tame these spirits. And that's what Guru Rinpoche did. He was a very powerful yogi, and he tamed the spirits so that the Dharma could be brought to Tibet. He also hid many religious treasures all over Tibet and Nepal in that area, in lakes, fields, caves, and over the years, they continue to be revealed and found. Some of them are ritual items, some are texts, and literally there are people who in their past lives were disciples of Guru Rinpoche who go and pull things out of rocks. It's quite amazing to learn about the tertons, the treasure revealers. I'm reading a book right now about a very current one who was doing stuff in the 1960s. And the things he was able to cure a whole town of leprosy, and he pulled things out of rocks, which a lot of them do, and he also led a whole bunch of Tibetans into a precious hidden land that cannot be found on any maps and can only be opened by one of these tertons, these treasure revealers. So these were all planted, these treasures were planted for future times, for future what we call degenerate times. So they are really very up to date in that way, that they were made just for us. So I'm going to teach you a mantra from Guru Rinpoche. This is called the Vajra Guru mantra. And I sang it earlier, but I'm going to sing it again now. You can sing it with me if you like. So this mantra is Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. And I'm doing the Sanskrit pronunciation. The Tibetans pronounce it slightly differently. So Om represents the enlightened body and our third eye chakra, and is here. Ah is enlightened speech, represents enlightened speech and the throat chakra. Hum represents the enlightened mind and is the heart chakra syllable. Vajra means indestructible or thunderbolt. Padma means, Vajra Guru means teacher. So Vajra Guru is Padmasambhava. Padma is lotus in Sanskrit. Siddhi means accomplishment, and Hong seals the mantra and brings the accomplishment. It represents the enlightened mind, as we talked about earlier. So Om Ahom Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum is the mantra. So this is the mantra of Padmasambhava, and I'm going to read you a little information about it. So this is actually from a terma, a treasure that was revealed by a treasure revealer, where the name of the treasure revealer was Karmalingpa. So this is a conversation between Yeshe Sogyal, who was his partner and consort, and Padmasambhava. And she says, sentient beings in the future will have profuse thoughts and tremendous aggression. They will have wrong views toward the holy Dharma. At that time, plague, famine, and war will be widespread among sentient beings, and in particular, China, Tibet, and Mongolia will be destroyed like ants' nests, and a time of terrible suffering will befall the Tibetans. You have spoken of many ways to remedy these afflictions, but beings in the future will have no time to practice. Those who do have a slight inclination toward practice will be beset by powerful obstacles. Beings will not get along with one another, supplies and materials will be insufficient. Such terrible times as these will be extremely difficult to avert. In such times, Guru, what are the benefits of relying solely upon the practice of the Vajra Guru mantra? For the benefit of people of weak intellect in the future, I humbly entreat you to tell us. And so Padmasambhava answers, "Oh, Lady of Faith, what you say is absolutely true. In future times, that practice will definitely be of short and long-term benefit for sentient beings. Although I have concealed many earth treasures, water treasures, rock treasures, sky treasures, and so on, which contain unfathomable pith instructions and methods of practice, in the degenerate times it will be terribly difficult for fortunate beings to find the conditions and circumstances to meet with the teachings. This is a sign that beings' merit is running out. However, in such times as these, this essential Vajra Guru mantra, if recited with vast compassion in great sacred places and monasteries, on the peaks of high mountains and the shores of vast rivers, in places inhabited by gods, demons, and evil spirits, at the heads of valleys, geophysical junctions, and so on, by faithful men, women of fine qualities, and the like, however many times, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 10 million, 100 million, etc., will bring inconceivable benefits and powers. Countries everywhere will be protected from all plague, famine, warfare, armed violence, poor harvests, bad omens, and evil spells. Rain will fall on time, harvests and livestock will be excellent, and lands will prosper. In this, future lives, and on the pathways of the intermediate state, fortunate practitioners will meet me again and again, at best in actuality, or else in visions, and at the very least in dreams. Having gradually perfected the levels and paths, there is no doubt they will join the ranks of male and female awareness holders in the Pure Land." So that's what Padmasambhava said about this mantra. Then I just want to read you a recent example. This was actually just published on January 31st, 2019, but the article was written back in 2006. Here. Oh, let's chant the mantra first, because I want to show you a picture of this guy. But let's do the mantra 3 times first together. Om Ahom Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. Om Ahom Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. Om Ahom Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. Okay, I guess I have the story. We'll talk one more mantra, and then I'll tell you the story of this guy, amazing story of a blind beggar who did the Vajra Guru mantra. But first we'll do the Tara mantra. So I mentioned that Padmasambhava and the Vajraguru mantra can be a way to strengthen the energy of Dharma, of Jupiter in the world by chanting it. And the moon, as I had shown you before, is also a remedy for Saturn. And the moon is the mother, and Tara is the moon. So mantras for Tara are another way to send compassion to all beings and protection to all beings. Tara, it's said that Avalokiteshvara, or Chenrezig, who is the Bodhisattva of compassion, was crying because seeing all the suffering in the world, and out of his tear arose Tara. And Tara is the activity of the Buddhas. She is the one who goes, she's the heroic one who goes and rescues beings when they're in trouble. So traditionally, if people are having a lot of troubles and are very frightened, they will say the Tara, recite the Tara mantra and pray to Tara. So I'm going to sing this mantra a few times. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Swaha. 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 Okay, so now I'll tell you the story I was going to tell you about this blind beggar in Bhutan and what happened to him with the Vajraguru mantra. Yeah, this accomplished master is they call him Benzaguru Druptop, which means the Vajraguru Siddha, the Vajraguru master, we'll say. His external appearance was dirty and unkempt, but who internally was extraordinarily free and liberated. He was previously a blind beggar who lived in the slums of Bhutan. It is said that his visual impairment was the result of curses wrought by mantras which his enemy had inflicted upon him. Before he went blind, he was a common farmer who belonged to the Bon indigenous religion there. To recover his sight, the farmer had approached many doctors who were unable to help. With no other resort, he asked several spiritual friends and masters for advice on what he should do to recover his sight. Finally, he listened to some master's advice and decided to start reciting the Vajraguru mantra, relying on it as his sole practice, because he couldn't read, but he just could, know this mantra. And eventually he went on to achieve an astounding level of realization. The more he chanted the mantra, the more he had faith in Padmasambhava, and he just chanted it all the time. When he completed 100 million recitations, his prayer wheel began to drip nectar. So he had one of those Buddhist prayer wheels, and nectar started to drip out of it inexplicably. This demonstrated the authenticity of his practice, and also how wonderful Padmasambhava's blessings were. And then he just kept chanting even more diligently. And when he had achieved 300 million mantras, in a dreamlike state, he personally met Padmasambhava and received a prophecy and got a very high level of realization. He was also taught by Padmasambhava a secret method to reverse obstacles, and it could swiftly remove all heavy illnesses or urgent calamities befalling a person. And so he became quite well known for this, because people would come to him for this. Besides this, every time someone requested to him for any help, his way of divination was also different from others. He did not need to use any divination apparatus, or did he require the person to say much, but he would be able to know the intentions of the person and be able to speak out intimate details about where they lived, their environment, and even personal secrets that they didn't want revealed. So he had attained great clairvoyance in addition to these other abilities that he got. And he just stayed poor. He just kept saying the Vajraguru mantra and probably got up to about 600 million. Although he was a master, he didn't alter his clothes or appearance, but remained like a beggar, allowing others to make offerings of whatever they wanted. Although he was invited to stay at a monastery and could have chosen wherever he wanted to live, he chose to live in a dilapidated corner of the monastery and sleep in his own old covers, using yellow and hole-ridden blankets and a pillow. If someone offered him cash or money, he would recite mantras and blow on them as a blessing before returning them and telling them not to use the money, but to keep it as a blessing. So he wouldn't take money from anybody either. And then finally, and this is kind of the proof of the pudding, 7 days before he passed away, he told the abbot at this monastery, "I'm going to leave this world and go to see Padmasambhava." At that time, the abbot felt that he was still healthy and thought he was merely joking. But sure enough, in the gentle, clear light of dawn, he sat in a cross-legged Vajra posture and released his consciousness into space. At that moment, a gentle tremor in the earth could be felt. So the proof of meditation masters really comes at the moment of death, because people who actually really achieve something, whether they're rich or poor, whether they're a beggar or whoever they are, if when they die, they're able to sit there and stay in this very special state of meditation and not go into a regular death, it means that they've really gone beyond death and they're able to maintain their consciousness. And instead of going through the Bardo experience that the rest of us do. So that's the, kind of the lesson, I think, of this is that we are in degenerate times. This is a particularly difficult time that we're going into for the next few years. And mantras, besides, the kind of practical things we can do for ourselves, getting involved with the power of mantra and reciting mantras may be some of the most powerful things we can do, not just for ourselves, but for the whole world. All right, so that ends my presentation. I have a few websites listed here. Astrohealing.us is my Vedic astrology website, and in case anybody would like to look at this more deeply in terms of their own chart, you can contact me. Vitalism.us is a program where I teach Vedic astrology along with spiritual practices and plant alchemy. And we are hoping to start a new cohort this year. And finally, I put up one of my teachers' websites, jameskelleher.com. He does a world prediction lecture every year. I started listening 3 years ago when Trump was elected, and it's been really helpful for me because I'm learning about what we call mundane astrology, which is the astrology of countries, which is done a little bit differently. And so every year he does this, and you can go to his website and purchase, for example, his predictions about 2019. And as I said, he has on there the S&P 500 and many countries. He goes into all the different countries. He calls 2019 the year of turmoil because so many countries are going through. He's been doing this for 30 years, looking at doing world predictions on the request of his teacher, that he needs to do this to help people. And so he's been doing it for about more than 30 years. And he says he hasn't seen a year that looks like this before in terms of so many countries being in turmoil and change. So there's a lot going on. So thank you very much for joining me.